So here we are in Logic. Obviously, the first place to start is by getting some general ideas down that we can work with. From the start, I think it's important to stress there are no right or wrong ways to go about getting ideas down. As I mentioned in the introduction, the purpose of this DVD is not to say that the way we work is the only way to work, nor is it meant to show that this is how all the professionals work. Instead, this is supposed to be more of an experience. Watching how others work is the best way to learn, and by watching us, we hope you'll pick up some hints and tips that you can evolve into your own project. For example, I know some producers who like to start by working on a drum loop, and they'll even spend a good couple of days just working on a drum loop that sounds just as they like it, before they move on to other elements of the music. Others tend to start with just a timbre and develop a motif from that, while others start with a sample, and some even just start with a simple MIDI motif. Some producers have a good idea of how they want the music to sound before they even touch a sequencer, while others just dive straight in, play around and see what comes out of it. The approach we take when we're writing trance is to get all our ideas down as quickly as possible in MIDI. The reason for this is that, for us at least, our creativity only occurs in short bursts, so we feel it's important to get all our ideas down quickly while they're still fresh in our mind. We find it's incredibly easy to become distracted when we're writing music. For instance, if we start by writing down a bass and then work on the timbre, by the time it comes to a lead or harmony, we've made the bass so huge that there's no room for anything else. Or once we've done the bass, we get stuck for an idea for a lead motif. We like to get the harmony, bass and lead down in one go. That way we're pretty clear on what's happening and the direction of the music from the offset.
Definitely, but we often just spend the day knocking around ideas, spending say 2 hours on each idea, and then after we've got 5 or so, we'll choose the best one to spend time on and sort of produce further. There's nothing worse than spending 50 hours on a track to then decide that the problem is that the initial idea is absolutely rubbish.
Now, one question I'm often asked is, where does the creativity come from? How do you come up with the ideas? Well, I've always found that music is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. With dance music, you only need a small initial creative burst, and then it's all down to the engineering, programming and general production of the piece. The idea is to engineer and produce your initial idea as best as you possibly can to get that idea across to the listeners. The idea could be something as simple as a chord progression. You can then spend a good few hours programming a timbre, applying effects and attaining the sound you feel really gets that initial idea across, and then you can work on evolving that by determining a bass from the chord structure and so forth. For us, however, we generally decide on a key, as in a musical key, before we even approach a sequencer. Now, I'm not even going to start approaching musical theory, since that's a topic in its own right, and it may be something that we touch in a later series of the DVD courses. What we will say, though, is that every key within every scale can exhibit a particular feeling.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning also for those who experience the shivers when they hear the word music theory that you can keep it real simple and there's no need for this. Just choose a key, have a look in Rick's book or on the web for the notes in that key, and just use those selected notes. There's only going to be 7 of them. This way you'll be at least writing in a key and things will sound more musically coherent. You can, if you wish, then experiment by using other notes, accidentals and what have you, but you'll find it easier to do this building on a solid musical foundation.
Yeah, I'd just like to add there as well that the second volume of the Dance Music Manual discusses different keys, what notes make them, the keys best suited to different genres, etc. Anyway, I personally don't agree with the saying that anything in a minor key is somber or sad and everything in a major key is happy. For example, we were recently asked to remix a few of Britney Spears' tracks, and as we started to look towards working on one of them, it was Hit Me Baby One More Time, we had a few problems trying to determine the key. We eventually found out why we had these problems, because we were trying to work in a major key and we found out it's actually written and performed in a minor key. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't strike me as a particular somber song. Now, that same song would sound entirely different if it were performed in E major. In fact, different keys can produce such different results that a quick tip here for any remixers watching this is, if you're struggling, find your remix project or transcribe it down into MIDI and translate it to a different key. You'll find that the results can be quite astounding. It has the characteristics of the original, but it's very different. Anyway, choosing a key is all dependent on what you want to convey. Now, the reason we want to determine a key is because, for the non-musos out there, every key denotes a specific sequence of notes that go to make up that key. So it immediately makes scribbling down ideas that little bit easier if we know what 7 notes on the keyboard we can use. For instance, with trance music, we personally feel we have a choice of around 7 keys: F major, F sharp major, D major, D sharp major, A major, C sharp major, or B major. After playing around on a keyboard just hitting the notes sequentially in each scale, we decided to use B major for this particular track. By deciding on this key, we already know that we can use the notes B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp. Of course, for the musicians watching this, we can use accidentals outside of that, but for us, knowing the notes that will harmonise with one another gives us a solid base to start working from. I should mention here that the keys I listed before are our own particular choice because we like the feeling they exhibit and believe they associate well with trance music. But the last thing I want to do is put across the impression that these are the only keys you can write trance in because, well, it's just not true. It really is just down to our personal preference. If you've been paying attention, you've noticed that we haven't started on a blank sequencing page in Logic. Now, you haven't missed anything. This is how we always open every project. The reason for this is due to something I've already briefly touched upon a moment ago. Creativity occurs in short bursts. Whereas some artists prefer to work on one melody, drum loop or timbre and complete it before moving on to the next element, we prefer to knock all our ideas down in one go. By that I mean the chords, bass and lead, just so we have a general idea where the track is going to go from the very offset. We found there's nothing worse than opening a sequencer and spending 20 minutes trying to find a sound before you even start stamping in notes. By that time, any ideas you may have had, they've just gone with the wind. Of course, we could just jump into a GM sound set, but this is another reason why we don't start with a blank sequencer page. For us, General MIDI has to be the most uninspiring collection of sounds you could ever come across, especially for dance musicians. I mean, it's absolutely fine if you want to recreate a piece of music that anyone can download the MIDI for, but when you're sitting down to write a dance track, we find it incredibly disappointing and difficult to get our ideas down with such a stagnant sound set to work from. Consequently, we've essentially created our own general MIDI kit specifically for dance. The harmony, bass and lead instruments are fed out to instruments that we've already pre-programmed. The bass, for example, is programmed on Logic's own ESM. Now, non-Logic users, there's no need to get upset. This is nothing more than a subtractive monophonic synthesizer, and all we did was program it with what we can only describe as a fairly generic dance bass sound. Of course, that's not really something we would use in a completed track. This same principle goes for our harmony and our lead. The harmony is a simple string patch we've programmed into a subtractive analog style synthesizer. And the lead we've just programmed on the Vanguard synthesizer. The Vanguard lead we've programmed is a short, stabby timbre. And we always tend to start with that, and as the music progresses into production, we'll then make decisions as to whether to keep that short, stabby type timbre or lengthen it into something else. Basically, we keep it short because its only purpose at the moment is to provide a base idea that we can then further evolve. For now, we're not going to touch upon the drums that you can see here. We're going to leave that until we have a musical idea down, and we'll discuss the drum parts further in session 2 when we come to building a drum loop. For the moment, we need to concentrate on getting some musical ideas down. We already know that we're writing in B major for this particular track, and that has dictated the notes we can use. So we generally start by stamping down a chord progression. Sometimes we'll start Logic recording and play around on the keyboard to come up with the progression. Other times we'll stamp in with the tools. So we'll start by putting a note in. We'll put a note in at B, I think. Let's drop that in there. And that over 2 bars. We'll do a triad, so we'll just copy that down. G sharp chord down. And then we'll just copy that across over our 8 bars. We'll do an F. This one E flat. And then we'll finish on an E. But we'll just we'll knock those down an octave. Okay, the chord's down. It's pretty standard, nothing special, but we can always develop on that in the future. With this now in, we can move straight into the bass. Now, unsurprisingly perhaps to some, we're going to do an offbeat 8th bass. Not all trance records do this, but a proportionate amount do, so we're going to follow that same line. It can be pretty much what defines the genre, and as discussed in the dance music manual, there's a good reason why they're on 8th offbeats. It's to keep it off the kick, so we'll just knock these in. There you go, and we'll copy that across our 8 bars. Just get rid of those at the end there. Now, the pitch for this is easy enough. We'll just take notes from our chords, knock that down to an F, to a D sharp with that, and to move that to E. Listen to that. Now, all that's left here is a lead. Now for us, the simplest way to come up with a lead is to just listen. Play back what you have so far and listen out for a rhythm. Just try to pick one out. Just as if you listen to the ticking of a clock, your mind automatically superimposes an accent on one of the ticks, which is where the tick-tock comes from. The same occurs with music if you just take some time out to listen to it. Now, with the bass, we already know that the pitches we can use here, so let's just get an idea of a rhythm down first. We'll just stamp some simple notes in. We'll just cycle this first bar and drop some notes in there. We'll shorten that one and copy that one to the... Oops. We'll copy that over to there. Oops. Let's copy that again. There we go. We'll delete this. We'll take that over 2 bars and we'll delete that second one and we'll copy that over. We'll drop that down. I think we'll do the same with all of it. We'll copy that over. that's just a bit, and we'll copy that over to there. We'll knock that up. And we've got to remain within the notes of our scale. So let's just have got knocking some notes around. Put this one up. See how that sounds. Let's try it on the second bar. Make that note a bit longer. I'm not sure about that first one. We'll take that one back down. We need something at the end though to denote the end of the sequence. So we'll just create a small step down. Yeah, that's not bad. I mean, it's a general musical idea. The idea's certainly there, and the whole process took less than 20 or so minutes. I think this is important, since you don't want to spend 3 weeks trying to evolve on ideas. It's how you quickly become bored and move on to other tracks, and you end up with a hard drive full of incomplete crap. But with those ideas there, I think we can produce on them and can work on them further. So let's get some drums in there and see how it all gels together with some drums.